This is episode 159 of Living Outside the Matrix.
Lawful Rebel,
comprehensive goals,
Lawful Rebel,
active minds, open doors.
Lawful Rebel,
You can see the signs if you read between the lines.
In the world today, we see the proliferation of bad ideas. Ideas that are false because they contain some aspect that is not true, that does not correspond to reality. I've been researching across a broad range of topics for the past 10 years, and I've found bad ideas in almost every subject I look into. In science, in medicine, in politics, climatology, philosophy, and in the thinking of ordinary people. Bad ideas, or ideas that are false, cannot lead to anything but failure and suffering. So it's imperative that we identify any false ideas that we believe to be true. We must consider them, evaluate them, judge them, and reject them. The most dangerous false ideas are not ones that point to events and things out there in the world, but those that affect our thinking, our values and our choices, meaning ideas that affect the way we live. These are the fundamental ideas that, if false, lead to many other downstream or subsequent ideas that are also false. For example, in medicine, the evidence that contradicts the cherished theory of the cause of disease, germ theory, is ignored. Such evidence reveals that the idea is false. Consequently, no one is looking for a theory of disease causation that is not contradicted by the facts of reality, or, in other words, one that is true. And remember, all consequent actions based on a falsely identified cause will A, not work, and B, cause suffering. And this is precisely what we see in medicine and healthcare across the world. The same principle holds for all the bad ideas out there in every field of study. In other words, this is a widespread cultural problem extending across the board. When you uncover something false in the mainstream narrative, it is not an unfortunate isolated incident. The root problem is systemic. My purpose in this podcast is to share with you some of the most fundamental false ideas I've identified, so that you too may consider them, and if you hold them to be true, perhaps you'll reconsider them. There is one specific category of ideas that should be at the top of your list for questioning. These are all the ideas that pertain to and reflect the thinking of men, the decisions men have made in their thinking. These are usually of a philosophical nature because philosophy is the study of fundamental ideas that affect the way human beings live. These ideas are not at all obviously false because they are quite abstract and removed from the observable facts of daily life. But that's not to say that they can't be identified as false. It's just not so immediately obvious. It is the results of such false and fundamental ideas that manifest in the institutions of men, such as in the realms of politics and economics, science and technology and healthcare, etc., etc. Now, some ideas are very powerful because ideas motivate us, they affect our values. The most obvious example is the recent idea of a pandemic with a scary disease-causing pathogen sweeping the planet, and this changed the behaviour of billions of people, as opposed to an idea of where to go to lunch. This has extremely limited effect. So some ideas can be very, very powerful. It's worth noting that we rarely deal with ideas one at a time. They come packaged together in bundles, with some component ideas appearing more obvious than others. These complex ideas must be unpacked. For example, the alleged climate emergency issue implicitly makes human beings the problem, since human actions, from breathing to all forms of energy use, release CO2. If we accept that human-caused carbon dioxide is a problem for the environment, we implicitly accept that human activity is the problem. So let's now turn to some of these dangerous false ideas and consider unconditional love. This is held up as some kind of wonderful ideal to be aspired to. But what does it mean? It means to love someone for no reasons whatsoever, with no condition placed upon your valuing them and your loving them. This means that you should be just as willing to love an evil child molester as a caring and benevolent parent. Or you should be just as willing to love a double-crossing liar as much as you would love an honest and trustworthy person. It means you should love a thieving, lazy bum just as much as a thinking person who is productive and generates wealth. Not only must these all be loved according to this idea, but to love them would be the highest form of love, since unconditional love is very special. I'm assuming here that you can see the utter perversity of this idea when you scratch beneath the surface. Who could possibly benefit from this idea? And the answer is obviously the scoundrel. Only evil can benefit from this false idea that to love unconditionally is good. Not only good, the highest form of love. We have to remember that to love is to value. When you love something or someone, you value it or that person. Yet this idea of unconditional love divorces love from the concept of values. You are not supposed to value anything in that person, but love them anyway. So if they have no virtues at all, you must love them, and if they are evil, you must love them. What on earth could love mean in this kind of context? This false idea has its roots in a faulty ethics, the ethics of altruism. The second idea I'd like to share with you is the idea that to be logical is to be cold and to miss the essential quality of being human. Now this is a false idea that was dramatized famously by the characters of James T. Kirk and Dr. Spock in the 60s sci-fi series Star Trek. It's 180 degrees wrong. Logic will serve you every single time that you are wise enough to use it. To be logical is to be rational. Being logical helped you learn not to put your hand in the metaphorical fire. It taught you how to act in a safe way, if you just look at the principle of that, in all of the circumstances of your life. Being logical taught you that if you hear someone lie to you once, maybe twice, then you don't listen to them a third time, or a fourth, or a fifth. Logic is what enables you to walk into the right bathroom. You know your gender, or if you have any doubts, you can look between your legs, and you can walk into the appropriately marked bathroom. It would be illogical for a man to walk into the ladies or vice versa. So it's important for us to consider, when has logic failed you when you applied it consistently? When a human consciousness functions, it uses reason and logic. When faced with poisonous berries or walking a dangerous cliff edge, logic is always your friend. In truth-seeking and discerning what is real, logic is always your friend. In understanding your feelings and the complexities of the human psyche, logic is your friend. In knowing reality, logic is your friend, and in operating within reality, logic is your friend. In choosing a life partner, logic is your friend. Etc., etc. You get the point. I trust that you are persuaded that the idea that being logical is to be cold and to miss out on some essential quality of humanity is entirely false. It matters enormously which ideas we act on. And it's easy to see that if we acted on these two false ideas, we would not be heading for a successful and happy life. We would behave illogically, and we would love a psychopath or a child molester. But we must act on ideas that are true to succeed. Here's another couple of examples widely held to be true, even among people who claim to be truth seekers. Idea 3, reincarnation, or there is no death. Without evidence to support it, beyond hearsay and spurious, unsubstantiated claims, this idea serves as a huge disincentive to live in a great many respects. And once again, we can see how hidden ideas can lurk beneath others implicitly. If this is true, then these other things must also be true. So this idea of reincarnation implicitly destroys the need to value one's body, the vehicle of experience. If you get a new body each time around, and there's no death, then there's much less incentive to value one's body as one should, if you only ever have one. Reincarnation serves as a disincentive to take serious care of oneself and one's interests across the generations in the broadest sense. It rests on the unwarranted assumption that there's another reality somewhere else that's superior to this one, and this is where we really all live. And we just come here to learn lessons and have experiences in a kind of spiritual boot camp before we graduate back to that other superior world. Now, not only does this idea of no death, reincarnation, implicitly undermine the need to manage your life wisely in every respect, but it also undermines the concept of an existential threat, such as tyranny or the collectivist state, which is almost upon us. If this idea is held to be true, reincarnation, then implicitly there are no existential threats, because reality isn't real after all. You ultimately live somewhere else, in some realm better than this. So any alleged existential threats or problems that people are trying to get your attention to solve have diminished importance. They take on the status of a mere illusion. You needn't worry about them as much. Now, I've come across this so much of the time when I talk to truth seekers, when I point out existential threats, and I ultimately drill down and find that it is these kind of beliefs that are disincentivizing them to care. But back in reality, the existential threat is real. Political collectivism and tyranny are real. You know, if you could ask the people, the victims of Nazi Germany and Pol Pot's Cambodia, they will tell you it's not fun, political tyranny. It's real. You know, and these threats do exist. We are being exploited and politically controlled. So if you adopt this idea, if you hold it to be true that you're going to live another life, then or multiple other lives, if you don't effectively die, your consciousness lives on somehow, then you avail yourself to a lifetime of procrastination and non-action. Reincarnation serves as a disincentive to act now, today. Death, on the other hand, is a huge incentive to act now, to make your life better today. Our imminent demise helps us to value every single day, since soon we won't exist anymore. So it's only when we accept and really hold as true, without any contradictory thoughts, when we hold as true and accept the inevitability of our own demise, our own non-existence, for which there is overwhelming evidence, then we have a powerful incentive to live our lives now. The next idea I want to share with you, the next dangerously false idea, number 4, is that we are all connected through consciousness. We are all one. You've no doubt heard this all over the place. This sounds wonderfully reassuring on the surface. It invokes a sense of feeling that we will all look after each other. So the one holding this idea will be okay. It implicitly assumes that we will all be looked after because we're all part of the same thing. Why wouldn't the collective thing look after all parts of itself? So the implicit thinking goes. It is psychological or spiritual collectivism. There is no objective evidence to support the idea that we are all one. People just feel it. And it feels reassuring. So therefore it feels good. It undermines, however, a sense of urgency to look after oneself independently of the crowd. There are plenty of self-evident reasons to conclude that we are separate from each other. We don't know each other until we reveal things that are going on inside. We have different ideas, different histories, different ways of thinking. The unit of humanity is the individual, and this idea that we're all one is a concealed attack on individualism, which, incidentally, is a part of any potential solution for humanity. Consciousness has identity. Like everything else, A is A. You are you and I am me. If you hold this idea in spirit, if you hold that we are all one consciousness, then it is only a short step to convince you to also hold that political unity is desirable too. It is a step towards preconditioning unsuspecting people towards political collectivism, which is the removal of your freedom, of all of our freedom. And it is tragic, I think, that so many truth seekers, frightened of offending the spiritual camp, will also hold this idea that we're all one as true. It's a false idea, and it is the destruction of individualism. We can see through these examples that ideas can inform our values. They therefore motivate us to behave. And we've just seen in these 4 examples so far how these false ideas can wrongly motivate us to bad outcomes. The last example of a dangerous false idea in this 2-part podcast is perhaps the mother of all false ideas. And this is because in accepting it, you have to specifically reject your own form of cognition, your human form of cognition, your faculty of reason. And this is why this particular idea is responsible for countless other false ideas being held as true. So what is it? The 5th false dangerous idea is that of believing in things without reasons. Believing in ideas without reasons. The idea of believing in ideas without reasons, namely mysticism. Not only is mysticism the practice of believing in things without reasons, but worse still, in contradiction of reasons not to believe in that idea. This corrupts and undermines any capacity for logical, critical thinking. It is the suspension of the human faculty of reason in judgment of truth or falsity. It is the belief in an alternative means to knowledge that requires no effort or understanding. And consequently, it amounts to the destruction of your capacity for knowledge. It undermines your capacity for certainty. To the mystic, anything can be true, no matter how absurd. Miracles and impossible things can happen. A fairy story can be believed in, no matter how much it contradicts the directly perceivable facts of reality. The appeal of this idea is that you get to believe in anything you are told to believe in, or anything that everyone else believes in. And for those who wish to mislead, to dupe and con other people, mysticism is the dream ticket, because you can tell any lies completely safe in the knowledge that your victim will not be able to identify them, because they don't require reasons, proof or evidence. But the cost of practicing mysticism to the individual mind, the cost of conceding to buy into a make-believe universe, is that you can never be certain of anything. Accumulating reasons in the form of evidence and proof is the method of achieving certainty. An idea that could potentially become knowledge moves from the possible to the probable and then to certainty in the context of an accumulation of supporting evidence or reasons. Generally speaking, the more evidence or reasons that you have, the greater your degree of certainty. If you have no reasons, then certainty is impossible. All you have is a blind belief that you must cling to no matter what. To be a mystic is to eject yourself from any kind of rational debate about an idea. If you are happy to accept things as true, or any one thing as true, without reasons, then what reasons would persuade you of truth of a competing argument? How would you evaluate the logical strength of any evidence? How could you explain your belief in terms another can possibly understand? How could you ever weigh up your belief against an opposing one? You have already renounced reasons, so you have no means to compare one idea's truth or validity with another. Other, of course, than how you may feel about it. And of course, why would you bother to weigh reasons? Since according to mystics who hold ideas as true without reasons, reasons don't matter. If reasons are not what convinces one into a belief, how can they ever convince the same person out of that belief? Furthermore, once you concede to believing in things without reasons, where do you draw the line? If you don't require reasons to hold ideas as true, then implicitly you must accept other ideas similarly claimed, such as the existence of ghosts and demons, for example. On what grounds would you not believe in these other false ideas? So the mystic, or the person who believes in things without reasons, necessarily lives in effect in a haunted house universe. So on the premise of mysticism, you place yourself in a terrifying predicament. You can't possibly know what is real and what is true, or how to know anything, or what crazy shit will happen next. This is no basis on which to manage one's life, let alone accept one single idea as true, as allegedly true. So to believe in things without reasons is to destroy the concept of truth in your own mind. To the mystic, the idea of anything correlating with reality is meaningless. What is reality, after all? It cannot possibly be a fixed absolute, according to this idea. The concept of truth is emptied of meaning by the idea that mysticism can be a means to knowledge, that believing in ideas without any reasons means that you can actually have any knowledge. Mysticism isn't all about God and the church, of course. And more broadly speaking, the concept of believing in things without reasons can apply to any subject, any alleged science, in inverted commas, because it wouldn't be, and indeed any claimed body of knowledge. If one has a tendency to not require reasons, then one can be fooled into believing almost anything on any topic. A logical fallacy will be sufficiently persuasive, especially if it appeals to your emotions. And in fact, that's precisely the purpose that logical fallacies serve these days, and they do it very well. These days, secular mysticism is all over the place. Tragically, it has become culturally acceptable to not need reasons for your beliefs. Belief in climate catastrophe or boogeyman terrorists or evil little germs that cause disease are all held as true for only the apparent reason, the say-so of an authority figure, of being declared as true by government or some official body or some expert, or indeed by everyone else. Everyone else thinks it, and that can be a pseudo-reason for people. Mysticism is like a computer software bug. Even if it's superficially not noticed, even if you think, well, there's a smart person, they know everything, but they still believe in mystical ideas, even in that case, it still wreaks its destructive effect, hampering and limiting the possibility of certainty, undermining the capacity for rational argument to whatever extent, and it opens the door to that nightmare universe. Mysticism has been with us all through our history, but this does not mean that we should hold on to it and cherish it. Quite the opposite. Mysticism, or the belief in ideas without reasons, is a false idea at the root of so many other false ideas. And it also ties in with mind control. Mind control is only possible on the basis of people believing in things without reasons. And that means identifying logical fallacies as pseudo-reasons. If you reject all forms of believing in things without reasons and evidence, in other words, if you reject mysticism, you are potentially free from mind control. Because mind control is simply planting ideas into the heads of those who decline the effort of scrutinizing the ideas they hear and subsequently rejecting or accepting them as appropriate. Mind control is simply feeding ideas to lazy, undiscerning minds. And don't buy into any of the nonsense fear-mongering of a mind being controlled by electromagnetic waves or beaming something at you, or nanotechnology, or any other claimed form of technology. This is all simply fear-mongering. It's nonsense. You can easily be immune from any control of your thinking, first by rejecting the false idea of mysticism as a valid means to knowledge, and then by getting into the driver's seat of your mind and staying there. Take control yourself, and then no one else can, in the same way that no one else can drive your car while you're in the driver's seat. So, just before we conclude this part one, a few words on identifying the false and why we are talking about these dangerous false ideas. Identifying the false is generally easier than confidently identifying what is precisely true, at least at the beginning stages. And this is because it's relatively easy to find evidence in reality that contradicts a claim and therefore falsifies it. And this is why the famous detective character Sherlock Holmes said in the novels by Arthur Conan Doyle, "First rule out the impossible, then whatever is left, no matter how improbable, is the truth." But of course it takes work. Identifying the false takes work. You must think, you must unpack ideas, you must check and see what assumptions must be in place and what implications will follow. When you've stripped away the false, then you can much more easily see the truth. So I hope you've got some value from this part 1. Please join me again in episode 160 next time for part 2 of Dangerous False Ideas.
Change you want to see.